How do songs really go viral? Sure, it could be something as simple as a single singing video posted to TikTok that just totally explodes, but now trying to engineer virality has become a big business in the industry. Perhaps no one knows more about how modern songs go viral than my guests today, Jesse Corin and Andrew Spellman, two of the co-founders of Chaotic Good. These are some of the music industry's go-to digital marketers. From Geese to Zara Larsson, Travis Scott, and Alex Warren, the Chaotic Good team has had a hand in making sure new songs reach listeners in a time when 100,000 songs are uploaded every day, and AI slop makes it harder to find good new hits than ever. All right, hello. Welcome back to our second live taped episode of On The Record, which is Billboard's new music business podcast. We are going to discuss all things virality. How do songs go viral today in this incredibly crowded landscape? I'm joined here by Jesse Corin and Andrew Spellman. They are the founders of Chaotic Good, which is a digital agency used by so many people, it's hard to count. But a lot of labels hire them, artists, managers, all in the service of breaking their songs online. So thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Okay, so I figured that we could start by just talking about the history of TikTok marketing, the very short history of TikTok marketing, because it's already changed. The online landscape has already changed a million times since TikTok was, popularized in like about 2020. So Andrew, do you mind explaining to me like kind of the progression of TikTok marketing for artists?
Yeah, for sure. I think in a lot of ways it's changed a ton, but like the core principles of what we do to make a song go viral like are the same, which is like we are looking for like underpriced, efficient places to put your songs where we think your audience will be. So that hasn't changed. But like when TikTok first started like proliferating, it was a lot of the old techniques applied to TikTok. So macro influencers or trigger markets or all these kind of concepts that were really popular in 2019 or 2020.
So like a Charli D'Amelio, like hire
Exactly.
Charli D'Amelio to use your song in a dance or something like that.
Jesse and I worked on a record together before we were partners where we hired Dixie D'Amelio. This is from, 5-6 years ago, and it made an impact. I think what we've seen the progression be and what we've done at Chaotic Good is kind of really think through what it means for like a feed to be algorithmic. And that really, really changes what your approach should be. So it's a lot more volume. It's a lot more thinking about niches, and it's a lot more kind of like hand-to-hand combat. And so like our day-to-day isn't that different. Like we are kind of studying the internet and TikTok and seeing what's working organically and then trying to recreate it at scale inorganically.
Okay, I've heard people talk about these kind of new age campaigns on TikTok and use a bunch of different ways to describe it. I've heard volume campaigns. I think y'all have said trend seeding before, where basically, can you describe exactly like what this means?
We use the term trend simulation, which I think is useful. Basically what we're doing like every day is sometimes artists get lucky, they post a song and it goes viral. And so what we're doing is going and looking and studying what actually happened. Like, what were the inflection points? Who are the key people that picked it up? Like, who are important people in certain genres? Like, what are the niches? Why did this happen? And so then when we have a song that isn't naturally going viral, we apply that to it. And so we say we're kind of simulating a trend. And part of that is also studying how the TikTok algorithm works, like what's important, how you want to pace out videos, all these kind of things. And so we can get into kind of the details there, but that's how we think about these song campaigns.
Yeah, and what we've done, I think, since the initial song UGC campaign is scale out a bunch more. So now we focus a lot on narratives and discourse online. And so it's not always even song specific. It could be, a little bit more about an artist campaign or somebody who worked with another artist, or, we had somebody we work with who produced a big pop record. And so it became about how do we get that narrative out there ahead of their record that they were putting out. So yeah, it stems a lot further now than just the song campaign.
Yeah, I've heard it described to me before as like back in the day, it used to be top down for marketing. So it's like hiring your biggest creators you can find, paying them and having them use their song in a video. Now, what you guys are describing, like practically speaking, is you run or have a network of a bunch of different accounts that are meme accounts or sports clips or truck videos or whatever these types of accounts are, and then you can plug the song into those so it creates more of a groundswell effect rather than coming from the top down. Is that correct?
That's correct. And there's a very specific reason why this works on TikTok. A question I like to kind of ask everyone in the music industry is, why do no songs really break off Instagram Reels? Like ostensibly, it is the same platform as TikTok. It's an algorithmic feed that you swipe on. There should be Instagram Reel songs, but that kind of is not a category that exists.
Yeah.
And the reason we think that's true is TikTok is entirely based around trending audios. Like that is the main primitive. It's like a really obvious point, but it has huge implications. And so on TikTok, it's really easy to get views. You just post trending audios. Like TikTok weights that really heavily in the algorithm. But artists can't do that because they want to promote their own music. And so a big part of what we are doing is posting enough volume across enough accounts with enough impressions to try to simulate the idea that the song is trending or moving or whatever you want to call it. And then as that happens, the artist posts start doing better and all this kind of things. Because, if you were building a new account, which we do many times a day, you would never post non-trending audios. It's worst practices, but artists have to. And so we view our job as kind of pushing against that and helping them.
Interesting. Wait, so like, how do you run all of these accounts? Do you just have a bunch of cell phones somewhere, or?
Yeah, pretty much.
We have
We have a large network of, both employees and contractors and people in our network, and yeah, a lot of phones.
we have a rep at Verizon at this point. We are like a VIP customer of them, and our office is overrun with iPhones. And our partner Adam has this theory about which iPhone is best. It gets deep very fast. Yeah.
Do you think it's more superstition, or do you think there's actually merit to what he's saying?
I think a lot of like trying to figure out the voodoo of the algorithm is. However, this is our job, like full time, and like we study it at like a collegiate level, and so anything to get an edge.
Yeah. Wait, well, can you tell when the TikTok algorithm changes? Like, is there a moment where you're like, whoa, wait, what was working yesterday is all of a sudden not happening today?
I think what we can tell is like, I said TikTok is structured around trending audios. I think the other side of that coin is TikTok is structured around these kind of like trending formats. And so for a specific genre in a specific time, there will be a format that really works. I think what we're paying attention to is when that starts to have diminishing returns and we need to take our camp and set it up somewhere else. I think we're really paying attention to that. I would say like algorithm changes is more so kind of on like Instagram and Reels as they're figuring it out. And so like if you listen to the Meta earnings reports, which I doubt anyone does,
I'm not listening.
view time on Instagram Reels is up 30%. And so that's a real thing. Like they're clearly perfecting the algorithm. And so we as a company have to pay more attention to it. We've been running a lot more experiments there. And I think a year from now, if you ask me like what's changed, I think it'll be that we've done a lot more on Instagram.
That's very interesting. Yeah, well, okay, so one of the big updates is that TikTok in the US is now under new ownership. And I feel like personally, as a TikTok user, I've noticed that the algorithm is a little bit different. There's also a couple days where I was getting like repeat videos. That happened multiple times. But I'm wondering for you guys, has that impacted you? Have you seen that algorithmic change?
No, I mean, I think it's more just being mindful of like the macro scale of what this means. And like Andrew said, like paying attention to what, the competitors are doing and making sure that we're mindful of what things may change at any time. And we always say like we reserve, a percentage of our bandwidth to kind of experiment and to make sure that we're building out the like, emergency situation just in case something were to happen on, any platform, in this case TikTok, that we use, so heavily. So I think it's more about, I don't think we're seeing that much change right now, but it's a signal that we should always make sure we're prepared for anything at any time.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, you guys work across like pretty much every genre at this point, right? Okay, so could you give me some like practical examples of types of content that resonates with certain audiences in certain genres? Because I imagine if you're working on a country song one day and a Latin song the next day, those are not going to be the same campaign to try to reach those audiences. So can you give me some examples?
This is a really core principle of the company, which is, we can drive impressions on anything. At this point, we know how to go viral. We have, thousands of pages, but making sure that they are like not empty calories and that they are impressions that will actually find your audience. And so, for a lot of underground rap songs, it'll be these kind of like stretched out clips of video games right now are really popular. Or like for a lot of like singer-songwriter stuff, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the kind of like yellow text quotes. We call that pastel talk. Like we think we were kind of the first people to do that, and now a lot of copiers, and then you have to pivot to the next thing. And so, and when we spoke, however many months ago that was, on the countryside, it is a lot of trucks, it is a lot of cowboy hats and things like that. But it makes sense, yeah.
I think for us, one thing as it relates to our team is really focusing on hiring people who understand the niches and the genres. We feel like, we can sort of teach anyone the principles that we have as a company on how to go viral and, you know, how to make an effective campaign. But I think that them being people who understand these niches and these genres like very, very intimately is a really, really important like core principle for us.
Yeah. And well, okay, so let's get into like why you founded this company in the first place. Because you guys are managers by trade, tried and true managers, have been managing for a long time through your other company, Mutual Friends. Did that inspire the creation of the digital marketing arm? Like, tell me more about that origin story.
Yeah, totally. I mean, initially it wasn't let's start an agency, but I think we just, you know, recognized all the challenges that happen for us and for the artist. And, you know, we were in a time, and I think still are, where there's so much pressure on the artist. And, you know, it's how much are they posting? Have they posted today? Why haven't they posted? You know, the whole thing. And I think for us as managers, our job is to support the artist. And so, you know, for a while, I think, you know, we were used to sort of throwing our hands up and thinking, well, if they're not driving it from their page, then, you know, what can we do? And we sat for a little bit, like 2 years ago, I would say, and we just recognized like, this isn't going anywhere. We've had a lot of success in digital, but we're not doing enough. And so I think at that point, we knew we really wanted to strengthen how we were in digital as managers. And then it made us more aware and more, you know, made it top of mind for us. And then I would say it wasn't until we kind of met our partners, Adam and Tim, two really brilliant young internet kids who were building something really interesting and had this approach that we had never really seen or heard of. And we decided at that point, like, this is not only something that will help us and our roster, but the industry needs. And so that was the idea to start the agency.
Interesting. Okay, so you guys feel very confident that you can make a song go viral online, but does that actually translate to streams all the time? And do you still consider a campaign to be a success if there is virality on TikTok, but maybe not a huge translation into streams on Spotify?
That's a great question. I think the way we think about it is, you know, if there's a ton of virality, but we aren't seeing conversion to streaming, it's kind of like two options. Like, there's something irreducible about the song that people just don't want to listen to. And that is something like we can't fully control. But the first thing we check is like, are we targeting the right people where the audience is? And so we may be driving a ton of views. There may be some trend happening, but it may not be connected to the song, or it may not be finding the audience of that artist. You know, if we still have a viral trend, like, I think it can still be a really successful campaign. We manage an artist named Kevin Atwater, who we saw that there was a lot of overlap with his fan base and the show Yellowjackets. And so we'd been trying a lot of stuff for this song, and we ended up putting a quote from the song like before the audio, and it went crazy.
From
From the show. Like,
yeah,
you know, I feel it so deeply in my bones, I think it's a quote, something like that. And then the song starts, and it went crazy. And the song has, you know, 40,000 creates on TikTok, and streaming improved a lot, but it's not like a crazy consumption hit. But what it's done is now every time he posts with the audio, his posts do well because he has this trending audio and it's tied to his brand. And now fans show up dressed as the characters, and it's kind of been this huge like moment for him. So I view that as like a huge success for a client on our roster, but it's not this kind of runaway TikTok #1 hit.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I mean, you guys have run campaigns for all sorts of artists. I was looking through your Instagram. You have artists on there like Coldplay and Zara Larsson and Childish Gambino. Could you walk me through an example of one of these campaigns working and why you think it works so well? Maybe Childish Gambino or
Yeah, Childish Gambino's a fun one. The song is Let Her Home. And, you know, when we get a song, you know, we sit as a team, you know, the full, you know, we're 25 people, and we talk about what we've seen on the internet that week, what we think is going to work, and then we try to put it into action. And we have like a very serious kind of like testing process. And kind of like all of our tricks were not working. You know, we throw the fastball and the curveball and the other thing, and it wasn't working. And then we kind of noticed one style of like quote on screen creators really working. But we weren't able to do it at a scale that was actually moving the needle. So Adam, who is, you know, one of our partners in the company who we mentioned, kind of had this like, fuck it, I'll do it myself mindset. And, you know, we are confident, and so is he, that we can train anyone to go viral. And so he just started training his friends, his brother's friends, and built this kind of like army of people to posts on TikTok, and these songs started going crazy, just driven off these people. I'd be swiping on my feed and seeing his brother, our employees, going very viral. The song went like very high on the TikTok charts. And now all of those people are hired by other labels, and they're some of the top influencers in music who had no experience before. And I think like that's one of the most fun parts is like, we'll do whatever it takes, honestly. Yeah.
Wow. Okay, wait. So for those who like aren't on TikTok every day, like I am, like what is a quote on screen? Like what's an example of that? Like are these love quotes? Are these
Yeah, just kind of any quotes, just, phrases. It could be, relevant to something that's happening at the moment. It could be more, introspective.
It's things you share with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your brother, your sister. They're like engineered to be shareable, but with like a little bit of finessing and teaching, like, we've kind of created this army, and they've driven over 500 million views on TikTok, just Adam's friends, cousins, brothers. And so obviously that is a much more efficient way to run a campaign than to go and try to pay Charli D'Amelio.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that's so fascinating because I didn't know about any of this until I started talking to you guys for a story that I did last summer on these types of campaigns. I can't tell you probably how many of these accounts I fell for, not knowing they were all thought about and manipulated in a way. I've seen many times on my, TikTok feed, maybe a picture of a coffee cup with like a quote that's like, "I can't believe I found you in this world." And I think that's an example of what you're talking about, where it's like designed for me to be like, "Oh my gosh, should I send it to my boyfriend?" And then you share it, it tells the algorithm that someone's interested and highly engaged in it, and then it keeps feeding that. Meanwhile, there's a song in the background.
That's right. And I want to like add one kind of caveat to the kind of Charli D'Amelio joke bit we have going here. It's like once we have a song that is moving and algorithmically hot, like we do engage macro influencers every day and think they're really important. You just want to do it at a stage where the sound is hot, because then their posts will do better. You'll have higher ROI. I think the worst thing that we all experience as managers is going out to a macro influencer, paying them a lot of money, and it's their worst post of the month. Like we think that should never happen. The sound should be hot, and you should have tested like what the like creative should be along the way.
Yeah. I mean, okay, what would you say to someone who's like, I'm freaked out by the fact that there's so much going on online that I don't know about? How do you guys feel about those who might hear about this kind of campaign and just be like, what? Are you manipulating my feed?
It's unfortunately a lot of the internet is, manipulation, I guess. And I think Andrew would always say like everything on the internet is fake. I think that one thing that we always say is all opinions are formed in the TikTok comments, which, is a reminder to us of like, we can help. And I don't know if this will make anyone feel better, but we can, a lot of what we do on sort of the narrative side will be, controlling the discourse. And so, I think most people see a video or see something about, an album that came out, and it's like the first thing that they see, or that first comment that they see is their opinion, even when they haven't heard the whole album. So it's really important for us to make sure that we are ahead of it and controlling that narrative and making sure it's in the direction that we want.
I think like in the past, let's say like a label and a management team do a great job. They get their artists on SNL or Tiny Desk or Triple J or something like that. They post it, and then they kind of wait for the comments. Oh, this was a terrible cover choice. Voice sounds terrible. All those sorts of things. What we do at Chaotic and with our management clients is, the second the SNL drops at midnight, you should post 100 times saying that was the best performance of the year. The question is, how do you do that at scale? And so it takes a lot of work and infrastructure. But like, I think controlling the narrative is really, really important.
Okay, so basically you can do that also not just with songs, but like you can have someone hire you because they just went on SNL and they want to make sure that everyone saw the SNL performance. So you could.
It's both seeing it and then also kind of like pushing a narrative about it, or kind of whatever we want to be have said about it. Like a huge principle of what we do, kind of alluded to in the beginning, is like, whenever someone goes on SNL, like organically, some people will post that was amazing or that was terrible. So all we do at Chaotic Good is look what happens organically and then do it inorganically at scale. And so like, when someone announces a tour, for example, like, as managers, that's like the biggest day of the year is the tour on sale. Like that is where the majority of your revenue will come from. And these days, like it's crazy to us, like artists will just post a static flyer on Instagram. If you have the infrastructure in place, like when we started to do this, the moment the tour goes on sale, you should post 100 times across many TikTok accounts, driving it, pushing narratives, talking about how great they are live. And so it does get overwhelming because I don't think the pendulum is swinging back anytime soon. I think like what we're seeing is things get more and more extreme.
it's more and more of why I think we exist and why we feel so passionate about what we do. You know, a lot of like the things that we've set out to solve through the agency are the pain points that we felt as managers. You know, we would go and like Andrew said, like that first, you know, tour announced day, I wish we could do more. You know, we're relying on the promoters and their, you know, kind of standard ad budgets across all the different shows that they're doing. And it just felt like, you know, and it's happening more and more now, is how do you cut through, you know, and the only way to really do that is the infrastructure. And most companies and, you know, artists, managers just can't do that at the scale that we do.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's basically like fighting the fact that there is so much volume happening. Just in general, the internet is so noisy that you kind of have to fight volume with more volume, I guess.
Quality and volume, but
Quality is important, but like
Yeah.
I view it as an arms race. It's like, you know, one artist hires us and we run 20 pages for them. Someone else will do 25. And for the right artist at the right time, like I think it's the right strategy. And so I don't think it's going to swing back for a long time.
and again, the context of, yeah, like you said, the timing and the song, you know, it's taking those moments that are so hard to necessarily get as an artist or a manager or, you know, the team, and making sure that you're doing everything you can in those moments, because usually it's just really hard to control so much of what has to happen.
One benefit, I think, though, for artists who are probably listening to this thinking like, oh my God, this is insane, is I think like having a company like us, like it takes a lot of the burden actually off the artist's shoulders for promotion. I think like when TikTok first came out, it was the, you know, the era of self-promotion. Song of the summer, we all seen the TikToks, you know, we hate them. And I think like that is clearly a short-term strategy. We've seen so many artists come up and come back down. And so I think with companies like us, it actually frees the artists up on their main channels to be way more like narrative-driven and brand-driven and fan-focused, and not have to be so kind of desperate online. And so like, you know, our prediction for this year is that artists' main channels become way more like about narratives and less about stream my song.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, what's interesting is like, I think you alluded to this, Jesse, a little bit, that these kind of campaigns are also happening in the world of politics and other avenues as well. At least on this part, if you're pushing something, you're pushing someone's art into their feed.
Percent, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, again, as managers who have done this for a long time, like we are really passionate about, you know, putting great art into the world and great artists into the world. And so, yeah, I feel like if we're gonna have to manipulate how to get a great song in front of somebody, it's good to do it with, you know, something that will make people happy.
I really wish that we could keep talking for forever, because I feel like I could go on for like hours with you guys about this, but we're nearing the end of our time. And so I wanted to end off with just one final question, and then we'll do what would you cue. So my final question to you guys is, how is AI infiltrating this process? Because I know AI slop is like a big concern on TikTok and other platforms right now for users. Are you guys using AI to generate stuff, or are you still making everything by hand?
It is probably like an unexpectedly low amount of our process, and not because we're Luddites. Like we would if we thought it was effective. For right now, like it is hard to keep the quality high enough. And in the world of slop, like that last 2% actually matters a ton. Where we'll use AI is in very specific instances where there is a specific AI format that is working online. And so an example of that would be like in the dance space, there are these AI dancing babies that are very, very popular. And so
It's insane.
yes, it's insane. And so we noticed that and then very quickly made hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of AI baby pages just for that specific purpose. But we are not like pressing a button, generating 1,000 pieces of content, having AI uploaded through the API. We're not opposed to it. It just hasn't been that effective.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay. Well, let's throw it to what would you cue, because we're out of time here. Okay. So what would you cue? I'm going to have you guys divide them up however you'd like. What would you cue to take you back to your childhood? What's one song?
Mine would be something from Stevie Wonder's Songs in the Key of Life. That was like the CD in our family's car. Maybe Love's in Need of Love Today. Great song.
Nice. Okay. What would you cue to remember your favorite era of music?
I can take this one too. Favorite era of music. Mine would probably be something off Revolver by the Beatles. I think For No One. I think that was like the era
So
where
good.
things started getting like a little psychedelic, like Cream and all that kind of stuff. And it's very guitar heavy. And yeah, that's my world.
Great picks. Okay. What would you cue to remember your favorite concert?
What More Can I Say by Jay-Z, because I went to the Fade to Black concert, like at the Garden, his like last concert ever. Me and my friends snuck into it when we were in high school. So
That's incredible.
yeah, best best concert memory for sure.
Amazing. And last one, what would you cue to remind you of a moment that changed your career?
Kings of Summer by Quinn 92 and AOK, two artists that we still manage today.
And we have Quinn in the
and Ron is
crowd.
in the audience.
Hey,
Okay,
Quinn.
there he is. Yeah, it was just a kind of pivotal moment in our careers, and led to the first record deal and the first platinum record and all that. And also a very early viral record in a different time. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much for coming to On The Record. We'll have to have you back soon. Okay.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us.
guys. Give it up for Jesse and Andrew.
All right, thank you so much to Jesse Korn and Andrew Spellman for coming on stage with me at South by Southwest. And thanks for listening to this week's episode of On The Record. If you like today's show, give us a follow on Instagram at Billboard On The Record, where you can see new clips of the show every single week. We'd also appreciate it if you rated our show on your favorite podcast platform. All these things help On The Record grow bigger and better than ever. Again, I'm your host, Kristin Robinson, and tune in next week for another peek behind the curtain of the music business. I'll see you then.